But so that's what I'm doing on campus and stuff right now.
Yeah. So, but yeah. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to bring us together and like talk to you. I just had like some things I'd been like thinking about and like was like really wanted just to hear your thoughts on Ashanti, like especially about I really liked like where our conversation last ended, like thinking about like the importance of like religion and just the idea that like there's something outside of, like us right here, and like how that kind of keeps us like grounded, but also keeps us going like towards what
Mhm.
we're trying to like accomplish. And that combined with like your interest in like consciousness and generally things like that, and like anarchy and gender and just all of these different things that I think that we've all really been talking about here. And I think that we could just like continue to just learn from you. So, um, but yeah, so I don't know how we want to. I guess it's just a conversation.
You'll
So
say more about like what you were thinking on a couple of those things, maybe.
yeah, so I guess for me, one of the things I just wanted to, I guess right now, what I'm like really thinking about is the way that the way that having like a more like spiritual or like otherworldly type of approach to social change leads to a
Yeah.
certain like commitment,
Yeah.
like a certain like resolve that like just isn't really as shakable. Um, and so I'm really just wondering like even now, like even when we were talking last time, you were saying that the church that you go to, it's not necessarily that you go for like the, Jesus is, God and like that, but like more so like be around like, people and like experience like
Yeah.
whatever that is. And so I guess I'm wondering like what is the role of like that thing that you experience?
Yeah.
Because we interviewed an artist for a magazine we're starting. And he also mentioned like an it where it was like and when he was creating, it's like he said he was like getting into the spirit like literally like after a show. um
Mm.
and so I'm just really interested in like what that it is, and how that like can be nurtured and provoked in people. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one, we can mutually learn from each other. It ain't definitely, and you guys just being in the university, I still got this thing where I'm always a little intimidated by folks who are in the university because you got access to so much and you've already learned so much. So it's always like you know, what we can learn from each other because I am still, I always feel like I'm still learning. But what you dealing with now, and I think for the last at least 10 years, I've been just giving more thought to um because I felt something was missing. Um in fact, me and one of my comrades were talking last night. Something is missing in terms of how we're kind of looking at things, how we're dealing with things. We can tend to be very political, as if everything is political in the sense like you got to have ideology, you got to have an analysis, you got to have certain kind of organizations, but you never deal with you as an individual and how you feel in this world. If you were raised a certain way. Now, just my church is not a Christian church. It's an Israelite, a Hebrew
Oh,
Israelite
that's right.
church.
Mhm.
So Jesus don't come as God. He comes as prophet and
Okay.
all like that. But it's the church that I was born into, and then by 5 years old, there was a split in the church, and my father and others went towards Baptist. But my grandmother, my father's mother, and my mother's family stayed with the Israelite church. Um, and so it's like, it's crazy. After 50 years, I'm back in the Israelite church, and I think because I there was something about it that I always missed. It could be funerals, it could be certain special occasions where family gets together, and that the Church of God Saints of Christ thing kind of there's something about it that would always make me feel good. The way that they worship, the way that they commune. And so it was a part of why I went back. But the other part was I I kept thinking about how we're just these individuals in this big, great mystery. And I felt like there was something that we're missing in terms of how we deal with that, and then the concrete of you, whatever your location is. I wanted something that would help take us out of just the materialism and to constantly make us think about there's more. And the words God and the word spirit and all like that may have one meaning to others, but it was also a way of not allowing us to get stuck in the immediate. If one believed that, even like, uh, um, God or Jesus can save us, it wasn't like that's what was literally going to happen. It was that belief that there was nothing that could conquer us if we put our being into it. And I didn't want to say our head into it, because I think it's probably more, you got to put everything into it. And it would make me think about the capture Africa on them slave ships. If I can find this one essay or this one brother who would write about the the transatlantic thing, and he would put it into, he's a Black Christian theologian, liberation theologian, and he would talk about what that had to feel like to be on this slave ship, and you're calling to your God, and the same thing is, my God, why are you forsaking me? If you believe that there's something going on and you cry out and nothing happens, that's our Nakba. That's, like the Palestinians say, that's our disaster. But then something still is there to give us hope, to those who make it through. And I wanted to know more about that, and less concerned with the religious language, more concerned with the function of the language that they're dealing with. This what's good about this is the first time I feel like I can even talk about it, right? So like 10, about maybe 10, 15, 10 years ago, it's like I'm reading more liberation theology. And what I liked about it was that Jesus became more important in terms of his actual life and his meaning to people around him, rather than those who just was more concerned with just Jesus is God. Like, Jesus became, for me, doing all this reading, he's quite a revolutionary guy. He's doing some things that are certainly contrary than what was going on amongst the Jews or Hebrews at the time. And he was challenging things, and sometimes you just had to really read the text. And then I find that there was these preachers from the 60s, maybe even earlier, who were always trying to put forth a more revolutionary Jesus that kept us moving. And if they preached a certain way, if they used a certain text, it seemed to resonate with the congregation. And then some of them congregations, it's part of movements. I wanted to focus on that, because basically our people are God believing people. The majority of us are Christians, but what's in there that gets us to feel like there's more to this. We don't have to accept what is. There's more to this. And can we, as the activists, the organizers, the revolutionaries, can we kind of learn more about that and how it might relate to us personally, and be able to use that as ways also of helping to raise consciousness, helping to develop new ways to reach people, to bring people together, and to act. So that's I think that was the main thing for me, is like, something about us keeps us believing that we can be free no matter how crazy it can get. Farrakhan can call for a 1 million-man march, and that brought out more than 1 million people. And it wasn't just the men. You know, there was something in us that keeps us like, we got to change this madness as a people. We got to change this. And then another experience was when Mandela came to the United States after he was freed. He came to Brooklyn. At the time, I'm living in Brooklyn. And he came to Boys and Girls High. And I lived like 2 blocks from Boys and Girls High.
That's where my mom went to school. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was amazing going into that school, and everybody's in the back, and it was like thousands of people to hear Mandela, to see Mandela, and the feeling that it brought was like, this is tremendous, man. It was such a liberating feeling. I think we got to figure out how to get there, regardless of the language that it comes in. We got to figure out how to get there. And those of us who are of certain spiritualities, then we have to learn, you know, more of that, and how to be more bilingual with other folks' beliefs too. Because there was a point, man, I seen it at Brooklyn, and then when he came to Harlem, we went to Harlem. They was asking people to give money. I'm seeing Black folks pass up bills hand to hand from way back, making that money up, and it looked like it wasn't nobody pocketing anything. I'm like, come on, Black people, you know, somebody pocketed. But that wasn't the feeling, and it wasn't the vibe. And it happened in Harlem too. I'm like, Black people, I think we do got this deep thing, but it's like, I don't feel like the main folks out there who are the speakers, the organizers, the fighters are dealing with that aspect. You know, so even in the readings I do now and in Judaism and stuff, I got to go to the parts that help me see the potential for its use for me, and then for others. You know, I know my depression a lot of times is when I feel like, man, we ain't gonna win, are we? You know, is my generation gonna be the last one to make that major push, and then the following generations? And when I feel that is when my spirit sink, but then I need reminders that that's just how I'm feeling in that moment. If I just look around, you know, even through the internet, no, folks are doing stuff all over the place. So I need not just keep hanging, being depressed. But if I'm depressed, how many other people are depressed? You know? And my comrade I was talking to last night is like, me and him, when we was doing a Estación Libre, taking folks to Mexico to check out the Zapatistas. So he's been through depression and stuff too. And so we both trying to now kind of help each other get to a better place. But we both realize that a lot of folks we know in the movement don't even deal with that individual aspect of how do we get to a better place as individuals so that we can maybe be more effective, you know, or even if it's you feel better, somebody else senses that and you help them to feel better, or you say something that helps them to take it a step further or to challenge some old beliefs. How do we do it? You know, so that's basically what I do. I read every day, but then there's a certain point where the reading becomes a crutch, because at a certain point you got to do something with it.
Yeah.
The same thing in the Panther Party is like, practice is the criteria of truth, you know, and like you can read all that stuff, but if you just got it intellectually, what's the point?
Yeah.
So I think that's even where I'm at now. But when I look at our folks, I'm like, come on, we can do better. And then in certain areas, I know folks are organizing. I know they're trying to do their best. But then things like with George Floyd will happen. You know, even before George Floyd, the brother in Oakland that the police killed, that was really major, one of the early major ones. People are all and the people all around the police killing the boy. People got their cell phones and everybody's taking pictures.
Right.
I'm like, what the fuck?
Right. Right.
Throw a cell phone. If you ain't gonna
Yeah.
jump in there trying to save it, throw the cell phone.
Right.
Don't just
Right.
come on, my people. So that, which also lets me know there is the fear of death. Because you know how vicious this system is. And I know that's in our psyche. So how do we get there? For a lot of people, you may have to come through a spiritual route to get them to see that. Others who are more secular, maybe they need something else, but I think it's an area we have not explored.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I look for me and sometimes for others. Can we figure out what holds us together, what nurtures a more resistant spirit, a more spirit that wants to keep us human, you know, and not just, did you read that book? Did you read this book? You know, right. That analysis, this analysis, because sometimes that's not what gets it. So enough said. That's, you know, there, but just that you asked that question, and I never get a chance to share them thoughts. Even right now, it's like really important for me. It's really important, you know, and then to get to hear our thinking, you know, is helpful, because I know that in there's the possibility somebody else is going to say something that educates me on something, or opens my mind about something, or confirms something, whatever. That's what community is supposed to do. You know, we can get challenged, we can, you know, but hopefully to come out of this feeling like, okay, this is good. It ain't over. We can still win. Yeah, and that's what I want to feel. We can still win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What you were saying earlier about the Jesus comment, I sent Justin. I was trying to find it on here on YouTube, but basically there was like there's this professor J. Cameron Carter.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
I've read some of his stuff. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, he's good. I'm about to be at a conference next in a couple months, and I'm hoping that he's one of my readers, that I get to read one of my papers. But he was describing, he has this video on YouTube, and he was describing Jesus as an anarchist, because he was like, Jesus was trying to get everyone else to be their own savior, you know, like, and so it's actually decentralizing the idea of like, you know, I'm the, you know, one that's going to come and, you know, save you from, you know, whatever. He's like, no, actually, like, Jesus wants everyone to be like their own savior.
Right.
And so right now I've been thinking about, like, I guess in like this, I've been thinking a lot about like music in particular, and like the role of like music as this like kind of secular, kind of kind of not religious, but kind of spiritual, like, and I don't even think spiritual really captures, you know, what it actually like is doing, but I don't think language captures anything, but and basically like really thinking about like the artist and how the artist is doing, like, I guess this goes into like culture really, and how like the artist potentially is someone that's acting as like a conduit, or like a kind of like trying to like incite things amongst the listeners of it, and then how does the artist then turn the crowd or the listeners into collaborators, you know, where like the artist is where everyone is now an artist, you know, like everyone now has a paintbrush, everyone now has, you know, what they need. But yeah, I've really been also struggling with like the not trying to get trapped in the religious language like strictly religious language, which is I grew up in the church, so it's very easy to do. But yeah, I just hear like so much of like just what you were saying, especially like the depression part too. Like it's hard because I know that like the only way I can ever feel better is if I ignore what's going on, because I know that, you know, my depression is directly tied to the state of the world. So the only way, so then if I'm feeling better, that means I've checked out, you know? And so it almost at times feel like I feel bad if I don't feel bad, because if I don't feel bad, then that means that I'm not caring anymore, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking with you, but
yeah, but there's all kind of readings on caring itself, just caring as a revolutionary thing, whether you're dealing with uh what's her name?
is it Sharp?
No, it's a feminist. She's dead now. Feminist poet.
Lord?
Yeah, Audre Lorde would talk about it. Bell Hooks to talk about it, you know, that caring thing, right? And a lot of times that's not something that comes through when you see somebody's them put forth their organization and they don't lay down their principles and things that they're doing. You don't really see anything about things like that, because that calls for a lot more from us. You know, if you talk about a comradeship, you got to talk about caring, you got to talk about being there, you know. Some of the religious theologians talk about, you know, the face-to-face encounter, you know. And I'm like, oh, that's an anarchist thing too. I mean, face-to-face is definitely it, man. Instead of, you know, someone here, someone down there, you're looking down on someone, and that's that whole thing. No, let us see each other's face, let us see each other on that basis. But I think it's one of the things that we gotta learn as revolutionaries who want to move forward more effectively, is what deeper ways can we connect with people, and if we can, what do we have to learn to be able to do that? You know, one of the things in prison, I want to get back to the music too. One of the things I learned in prison is I'm reading, I started getting into the more radical psychologies, and then I started reading some counseling stuff too. But how they came together was how to be present for others, you know. And I found that to be so amazing, and I'm like, oh, I never even looked at it like that. But it calls for more of us, that whole thing around being more vulnerable for each other, you know, everything. And I even saw it as also a way to kind of cut down on infiltration, because if you're in a group, or you're working with other people, and you're able to have some real authentic conversation, really get to know each other, and that extends to like family and neighborhood, the usually the ones that are infiltrating, you ain't gonna find out too much about them. They will come with the rhetoric, and they're gonna, you know, and I haven't watched that Judas in the movie. I ain't even watched it yet, but no one. You said no. Okay. But I gotta watch it because my daughter said I gotta watch it, man. So anyhow, but what I think happens is that a person that won't share, sometimes you got to be a little suspicious of a person that just moved into the city from somewhere else and you don't really know much about them. Like, well, I need to know you. I'm allowing you to know me, you know. But that's also it's a spiritual thing too, regardless if you're religious or not. Like, it helps you to like trust. So the other elements come in there: caring, trust, the ability to like just be open and giving and be receptive. So those became other things that made me want to focus on how deeper we got to get into this in order to not keep committing the same mistakes. Because when you don't do them things, it's almost like you're setting yourself up to repeat all the mistakes you've ever made. You know, the egos come into play. The thing I want to say about the music, And it's like you say, people don't, there's so much potential in art, in the artist, even for the organizer and all them people to kind of see what they do as being artistic. You know, you're creating, you constantly are thinking like, create. So ideology just, you can't do that. If there's set ways that the only ways that you can relate to somebody is to sign them up to a committee and say, oh, do this, do this, do that, and you never really get to know the person. Authoritarianism, it's just setting it up. But the music, man, every day I walk the dog, I got my music going.
Mhm.
And if people ever put a camera on me, they may see me bopping when I'm walking the dog, right? And like, cause I'm feeling good. And
Yeah.
then, and it depends on what the music is too. But so sometimes it's the church music, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's Curtis Mayfield or whatever, the Temptations. But I always think about, it makes me feel good. And especially sometimes when I'm really feeling not too good, I'm really down. What is it about this music? And it's cultural too. I know it's cultural in the sense like, if it's Mavis Staples singing Holy Holy, that may not mean anything to, white boy from the Appalachian Mountains, I don't know, or maybe even from the university. But for us to hear her sing, or Mahalia Jackson to hear her sing, man, it does something. It makes you feel something, and in a way that sometimes there's no words for it. So it opens you. It gets you into there's something about this life that says, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. And so like I'll even go online sometime, ethnomusicology, and to see what folks are saying about the different music, whether it's gospel or whether it's hip hop. Though I'm not much of a hip hop person, I my wife is more hip hop,
Yeah. Why do you think that is, that you're not into hip hop like that?
because I know the best music came out of the 60s and 70s. It's a foregone conclusion. I don't know, but you know what it is? I don't understand what they be saying sometimes, man. I'm like, oh my God, man. But I recognize its importance. I mean, I do, but hey, I ain't got to be a special in that area. Other folks are, but I still love the music that came out of the 60s and the 70s. It just makes me feel good. And if that's so, I know it does with others. I know when I go to church and hear the folks sing in the church. My church is a cappella. There's no instruments, anything. But there's certain hymns or songs that they sing, man, just it puts me in a certain space, and it's a space that says, hold on, breathe, it's gonna be all right. It cannot be written off by those who are so scientific, as their thing is, yeah, but that's all that spooky stuff, man. That's all that spiritualism stuff. That's bullshit, Deal with the function of it and where it puts people, what it creates in them spaces, because what it creates in them spaces is what's most important. And you can be as scientific as you want, but do you have a community of folks that you're organizing and moving somewhere, and have you dealt with them other questions that allow a person to to deal with the constant daily battering of their spirits, of their personality, of their sense of being? That stuff becomes really important, because you want to sustain these movements. And if you keep getting battered down, man, every day, all kind of little ways, you're bound to get depressed to the point where you want to check out. You might talk about checking out maybe just temporarily. Some people want to just check out, period, and figure out how to do that. whatever their thing is, you know. And we got to figure out how to make people check in, or that the other language around staying woke, you know.
Yeah.
So it makes me realize that back in the 60s, 70s, we may have had more simplistic notions of revolution, but like now it's like, no, it's much more complex, but it's still doable. But and we just got to figure out how to incorporate more to make the possibility real.
Mhm.
You know, because it's not people. There's a whole bunch of people that's just depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, one, I just appreciate the conversation about, because this is something, I mean, that board that Zuri just we wiped off yesterday was a lot of the stuff that we're talking about and thinking about together is like this like emphasis on the material and like and what that kind of like takes off the table when you just like everything's material, everything's scientific. And then what you were just talking about, and then because yeah, it's making me be reflective on myself too, right? Because I'm thinking, because one, I think there's, so what was I saying? So I'll just go to one. So specifically, I'm thinking about like some of my friends back home. You know, they're in Tennessee. I'm like in the day to day, I'm not around them, right?
Mm.
And like especially during 2020 and like whenever something like whenever racism, anti-blackness gets like pitched up and people are angry, tapped in. A lot of my friends are like, I can't physically allow myself to care or like pay attention or be concerned because again, it's just too much. And it's like, and because I remember like he said this and he was like, what do I even do? And and I think this was around Lorenzo Irvin had just like did an interview, just like I forgot exactly the title of it, but something about it basically giving some type of anarchist analysis, right? And I'm like, peep this. This is something like this is something you can think about. But it's like at the end of the day, it's like that's still that like concept like still doesn't address that feeling. Like it's still like, and it's like, and that just has to be worked. And I think that's something like you can introduce the concept. Again, it's like you introduce the concept and then in practice, that concept can deal with that feeling. But just by sending somebody like, hey, like you can pay attention and you can like deal with the feeling of what's going on. For me, it's sometimes it's like, okay, I know that there's like routes that I can take, right? For some people, it's like I have to like just knowing about a route or an option, like I have to see it. Like I have to see it, I have to feel it. So that's one thing I was thinking about as you were talking. And then yeah, I'll just stop there. But yeah, I think, and there's so many, I don't know, you're talking and I know Desmond probably appreciate this too, but and I don't know if you people, but I'm hearing so much of just like I've been reading a lot of like Amilcar Cabral lately. And I think if there's someone who's like in Missouri use him a good bit in our paper, because it's like I feel like if there's someone who's he definitely loved him some science. He definitely loved him some modernity. He was like, we got to be modern. And a lot of times he was like, we got to get this religious thinking out of here and think scientifically and modern. So like there's definitely critiques to have on him about that approach, but there's also this stuff about because like I remember like I was reading some of his lectures to the party, and one of them is called Revolutionary Democracy. And I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, what's your political program of revolutionary democracy? He's talking about intimate relationships, just like how do you talk to people? And he's like, we gotta trust people. We don't lie. Like all these things. I was like, oh, this is not a program. You talking about like creating new ways of relating to people. He's talking about specifically like, as a political party, like we're not gonna just be authoritarian. He said we should be like, the people should criticize us so much to where if they feel like we're not even useful, we should be removed. And we gotta be okay with that. So I was thinking about some of that too when you were talking.
Yeah, that, like how you talk to people part is so like that is like for me it's like because I think like Ashanti, what you were saying about like using reading as a crutch, like I definitely feel that. Like I be doing that sometimes, like straight up. I'm like, I get depressed, I'll just hop in a book. I like let me try and resolve this. But I think like that how you talk to people, like, and that's why like when I feel like when it's like just talking to like family or friends about like even just like what I'm studying, right? There'll be times where they stop me and just be like, that doesn't make sense. Or it's like, or it's just like, I can't like, I don't even want to think about that. That's another thing that people say sometimes, because it's like, it just be like too dark. And it's like, all right, well, how do we like, you know, how do we think about like what's not making sense, or and what is tapping into like something that is like making people not want to think about a certain concept or something, right? So it's like, and that's that like that criticism part that like also needs to be connected to like how we're talking to people. Like how do you make things connect with people, and how do you also learn what isn't connecting and for like what reason specifically. But,
yeah. You know, and you know the thing about conversation, I think we have to learn how to get much better at having conversations, so that it ain't always us talking at people or to people, but we're talking with people. And that part of what that means is that you really gotta hear other people, and they may be saying things to you that's crazy, because it may sound like, oh, you're not critiquing capitalism, or you're not critiquing the effects of racism on us. And okay, maybe they're not, but can the conversation happen in a way that they hear you maybe come from a different way, a different perspective that's personal? How does capitalism affect you, or how does, you know, the effects of racism affect you? Because I'm sure that the effects of racism still affects each one of us. Like usually we'll harp on white folks about, if you're racist, you're born in this society, you're white, you're racist. But maybe not so much, you're black, and the things that it has done to us is going to be with us all our lives, unless we figure out ways to lessen it and be able to pass something on to other generations that's lesser, and they develop the skills to get lesser, and maybe 2 or 3 generations down, maybe some of that won't be noticeable. But it affects us in so many ways. We need to figure out how to have the conversations, and I think the thing when I'm reading them in the prison and stuff, when I'm reading the critical theory and the and Maslow was, I think, self-actualization and all this other stuff, and then the counseling skills and stuff. I'm like, man, I wish I'd have knew them things in the Black Panther Party, or we knew them things in the Black Panther Party, because maybe we would have done better, I think that's one of the things that moved me to anarchism, was like, it gave me a way to look at what happened in the Black Panther Party, and like, oh, that leadership structure, man, we was like really set up to fail once we took it on, and then got so caught up in it that we the vanguard now, and we never got to know each other. Also, there was points where there was chapters, Panther chapters may have been started somewhere, and someone wasn't necessarily coming from a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist perspective, but they were maybe more cultural nationalists or Pan-Africanists, and the party was like, not acceptable, you out of here. Why could not the Panther Party had different expressions, because today we need people to know that there's going to be different expressions of liberatory practice, liberatory living arrangements, all this, stuff like that, and not just like one thing and you got to follow this. As anarchists, we got to be open to that diversity, and stuff like that, and just figure out how to keep it on some kind of common page that we can actually see our power to change things, but everything becomes a tool, whether it's the music, whether it's the people's writings, whether it's how these podcasts that come up and all that other stuff, and then more creative ways actually in the streets or in communities that we engage people. I think it all becomes really important, man. It's just really important. We won't shut somebody down because they're coming from a different place, but we'll keep with the commonalities. And just real brief, the thing with keeping to the commonalities, one of the things that one of my comrades was really good at back in them days was whatever conversation he was in with someone in the community, if they were coming from a different place, he would look for the commonalities. He would focus on the commonalities and let them know, yeah, we may disagree with that, but you know, we're in agreement on this, that something has got to be done, you know, to help them to like keep a sense of community and know that there can be differences, there can be contradictions, there can be them kind of internal struggles, and it's okay. Instead of like your objective is to chop them down until you show them how correct you are, you know, all that type of behavior was like why I'll never go back to any kind of that kind of authoritarian ideological thing, because it just erases people where they're at. They just gotta follow you. They just gotta fit into this mold.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we just gotta figure out all the different things in our world that can become tools. And the spiritualities and the musics and the other art forms that's involved, or even like what's going on in the community centers, what efforts are people making to like have alternative education, community gardens, you know, what other expressions of liberatory practice is going on that we can like see, oh, this thing that's already happening that's can take us further.
Mhm.
And I think the thing is we just ain't figuring out how to kind of bring it together without people feeling like you're going to take them over and you're going to mesh them into this thing now where they'll have no more identity. You know, how do we do it, you know?
Yeah. One of the I have okay, this is the first thing I'll say or I'll ask. One thing I've been really thinking about is I've been reading like Emil Durkheim and just his idea of like the totem and
Oh God.
yeah and like all of that. And one thing I've been talking to like Justin about it is the idea of like a political party, but like it's like literally like a party that like is like religiously like or not religiously like politically inflected. So it's like, but not necessarily in the way that like we're trying to proselytize people while they're at the party, but more so like when you walk in, like you pay like $1 knowing that it's going towards like something to free political prisoners, you know, or throughout it we play like my roommate, she's Eritrean, and there's this artist Abraham Afrokarzi, something like that, and she's gonna kill me if she watches this and I butcher that name, but he was like an anti-colonial artist, like out of like Eritrea, like same like feel it. And so we like, you know, play these artists, you know, while, and so I don't know, there's something about like just really trying to like think about like how can we implant political things unconsciously while people are having fun, but while also creating new relations in the, like how like creating new relations with people while we're having fun, you know, because like at parties there are these like high rates of like assault and these things. So how do we, it's almost like how like comedy is what kind of like is where we like push the limits of like what, you know, we can, what we're like really thinking. The same thing with like what I'm thinking about like with like the party is like how do we put in new relations in ways that people now leave. And then the party also, thinking about the totem again, the way that the party, like these have regular parties where it's like like church, where it's like a remembering, you know,
right,
like
a remembering, right,
like a re-up, like every like week you have like, you go to the political party, you know, but yeah. And so I guess I'm just wondering like, what were parties like? Because I've been, you know, like what, and like what, like, because I just think there's something about like the like phenomenon, like the effervescence and like the muscular tension that like is resolved like in like just like dancing and things like that. And I'm wondering like what did parties like look like, or what were they like trying, like what was that energy like, what was that like, what was coming out like, I don't know.
Like did the Panthers have parties? Like is that what you're asking? Like did like
planned parties like
had parties and went to parties.
Okay.
And it was and I mean, you'll see some of it. Remember, you know, in the Panther movie, and there's them scenes where there's there's the music, and then there's they would like dancing in the street and stuff like that. It is one of the things that I liked about the Panther Party was that they was open to you going to a party. You can put your papers down. I mean, you can do your thing, you try to sell your papers, but then if you want to, you put your papers down and get in the party, get on the dance floor, you know, or somebody's got a, you know, some marijuana going, and or they got a, you know, some beer or some wine or whatever, and you partake. You just know, you know that if you do, you're always supposed to be in moderation, right? But the thing was to show people that you're human, that you're not gonna come off like the Communist Party. You know, you're gonna come with the ideology, you're gonna come with the clipboard. You want people to see you, because that party allows you to be you. You ain't got to put on nothing, you know. It's you and other people who are just, you're gonna enjoy yourself. Even the whole idea about enjoying yourself in a society that wants to limit that, take that from you, because there's so much power in just joy, enjoy, you know. It became very important. So there was them parties, man, and where people were playing music and just being free. And some people would look at it saying, wow, there's too much partying. Malcolm may come out with a statement and say that, you know, we shouldn't be singing, we should be swinging. But Malcolm, wait a minute now. There's some, the singing and the partying can be liberatory also, as much as the swinging can be. And it's just knowing that from a cultural perspective, there is so much more for us to use than maybe we normally think about. When you talking, made me think about subway system in New York, and how there's certain times, man, you would just see people partying on the subway, in the cars, not on the cars. And the anarchists would be one of the only ones to focus on expressions of freedom like that, you know, and would try in different ways to encourage it, you know. And that was like, it would allow me to see how anarchism in practice rather than anarchism in theory, and how people was trying to see the new possibilities. So different from either classical anarchism or classical just political organizing, you know, ways to help people see that their enjoyment of life was most important, and that should govern society, rather than you have to keep thinking that you have to sacrifice, you have to suffer, you have to, for this system in order to make it. You know, you got to get a job. I mean, even to the point where people are convinced, you know, that as they're growing up, going through school, the objective is to get a job. Why? A job is always related to this capitalist system. Why should that be your objective? You know, be free. You know, that corporation and that whole structure is what's going to keep you locked into this oppression. Why should your future be geared towards, I want this particular cog in that system where I'm going to be the best engineer that I can be, working for this corporation? You know, who's challenging that? You know, who's saying like, yo, why do we have to relate to bosses? Why can't this factory just be ours, take it over, like they tried to do in Argentina back then, and it might have been the early 2000s, man. It was like a great attempt that the workers just took over this factory, man. But for people to see that we are so locked into this madness and not really question it, limits our abilities to like go beyond it. Somebody got to be able to say, no, that's bullshit. No, there's other ways that we can live, you know. So getting in them kind of positions become important. But there's a lot, man. And just because I put a note, Amilcar Cabral, one of my favorites, you know, and because privileged guy, just like Lenin and the rest of them, Bakunin and the rest, but how he used his privilege to go to all them different villages, all the different groups, you know, and build a relationship with them around, you know, getting liberated from the Portuguese, you know. And the fact that he was really clear about self-change and the ability of people in the movement to like say, we can fuck up too, and we can be called upon it. And I used to read about examples like you had mentioned, like if someone's in charge of something and they ain't doing what they're supposed to, they can be taken out of there. I saw examples reading of it happening in the Zimbabwe struggle and the Angola struggle. It was like somebody may be taken out of position, male usually, because they don't use their position to screw all the women. And finally the women say, yo, man, you out of here. You know, you ain't going to be spouting all that revolutionary stuff and you just doing all this to us, you out of here. And that's how they would move. But then what I also noticed is that once them liberation struggles sort of won and got solidified,
Yep.
that all that stuff got cut out. The equality with the men and women and the participation of the women and others, solidly men began to do the same thing that the oppressors did, and they never got out of that situation. So we got things to look at so that maybe we can avoid them kind of errors.
Yeah, I wanted to actually, I was thinking for a while, like the past like 20 minutes, thinking about, I mean, the conversation we had about communication, particularly in relation to Cabral. I want to get back to Cabral, and I'm actually Cape Verdean, so my family grew up. I have an uncle who's in the PAIGC, and you know was a political prisoner in Cape Verde. But actually, I go to school in LA, but I'm in Boston right now with family, and I was talking over the weekend just about like their experience, you know, growing up during the anti-colonial years, particularly the PAIGC trying to recruit people into like the party. And I had some uncles telling me about this recruiter that they sent, you know, talking about Marxism-Leninism and talking about, you know, secular and Missouri's talking about modernity, like what they thought to be, you know, what Cabral's message was as the leader of the party. And my family grew up in a really small like island that's super Roman Catholic. Super Roman Catholic. Cape Verde is a Roman Catholic country, and they ran that recruiter out. They said they ran him out. They didn't care about nothing he was saying about the PIGC, about anything about God isn't real, about, you know, dialectics, about historical materialism. They didn't care about none of that. They ran him out. And like it goes to exactly what we're saying. Whether it's parties or whether it's church, you know, whatever like that feeling is, like people like live their lives around the church, you know, going to church, going to mass on Sundays, on the weekends, that's where you get together, that's where you see everybody. And here's somebody like, you know, talking about liberation, yes, talking about capitalism, talking about oppression, talking about Portuguese colonialism, but in a way that completely negates the way that people find joy and pleasure and community in their lives. And that's something I was just talking with my uncle, like taught me that, you know, over the weekend. But I mean, to also talk about Cabral and about, you know, leadership, about revolutionary leadership, about African leadership in particular, and also to talk about myself. What you talking? I also think it's really important to talk about yourself. What we're talking about infiltrators, you know, and like building community. My grandfather was actually a Portuguese. He worked for the Portuguese state. He was a colonial official. And one thing he always said, because he wasn't in support of the PIGC. He started his own political party after Portugal fell. And he said that I'm the PAIGC of Cabral. I'm not the PAIGC of these other dudes who he thought, and like I disagree with my grandfather politically, but he was like, these dudes are opportunists. And they don't believe, like Cabral he's a real dude, he's a smart, intelligent, caring dude. But he saw like a lot of these other like young people at the time, like they didn't really care, you know. It's like once Cabral's gone, like it's different. Like I don't know this party anymore. He wasn't completely right in PIGC in Cape Verde in particular, you know. It's still, you know, a political party that operates under like global capitalism. But there's, you know, I don't know, there's some good people. That's the thing I'm thinking about constantly, you know, especially when it comes to Africa, my right? And my mother's from Angola. Basically what happened to like revolutionary leadership. And not only what happened to revolutionary leadership, but what happened to like revolutionary affect, you know, and like a desire to change. And goes back to the beginning of the conversation we had about Ashanti, about, you know, what do we want to be? How do we want to be in the world? What do we strive to be? And I don't know, yesterday, we were talking about depression also. Yesterday I was driving to the movie theater where I saw a bad movie, of course, a bad Hollywood movie. But I see the Batman. I saw the Batman movie. Yeah. I was driving to the movie. I saw a giant billboard, and it says, "Black history is American history." I guess I you know, I want to drive off the highway. You know, I'm like, what is it that we want to be? Even if we like, even when we were, like, you know, the quote unquote failures of the revolutionary eras, like 60s and 70s, like we just want to be Americans. Like I don't get it. And I think that says something about spirit, and that says something about culture in like a mainstream level. And that, you know, maybe there's an underground that we're talking about right now. You know, there's always like an underground current. And you know, there's a cycle there. But you talk about depression, man. Black history is American history. I'm like, man.
but it's part of like that's part of what we're battling, right? Because there's so much tied into that, you know. And excuse me, but I've had this call for like 2 months. I may have to go get some water. But anyhow, I think that's a part of what we're battling. Is it's on a level of consciousness that we're trying to get Black people to say, people, period, maybe. What is it to be an American? What does that mean to you? You know, and why is this effort to like everything Black that we've done or produced in our culture now it has to be American? What does that mean? You know? And so on some levels, I mean, yeah, we can help people with all kind of practical issues around they're getting kicked out of their homes, they're getting thrown into the prison industrial complex, police shooting us down in the street and all this other stuff. But with all of that, you got folks, this is probably one of these big times where they're still pulling us into the system, to the vote, you know, all this other stuff. So how do we battle that, you know? I'm gonna go up get some water. Go get some water and be right back.
Yeah, I feel you on that Black History Month billboard. Does like honestly, the way Black History Month just makes me kind of depressed now. Like I always talk to Justin about, because we always see these damn NBA commercials with like Black History Month.
The Sprite, like, oh Hennessy.
My gosh.
He said Sprite and Hennessy.
Bro, literally, I see Sprite and Hennessy commercials that play at every like NBA game, and it's like making the movement. Hennessy.
Well, I no, the other day during the Super Bowl, I was like, can we bring the racist commercials back? I'm tired of representation commercials.
I hate representation now.
I was like, I like the racist commercials better than, what was it, the like new Google phone.
The cameras.
We can now better take pictures of dark skin. It's like, I don't want a camera to work better for me.
Right.
Carter G. Woodson rolling over in his grave.
Who?
Carter G. Woodson rolling over in his grave.
Oh,
yeah. Black History Month, man.
This is what Black History Month has turned into. It's crazy.
Yeah. All of this, I mean, the system's ability to co-opt our stuff and use it against us and use us to, just a couple of days ago, I'm walking the dog and I'm thinking about how I guess with the rise of Black Lives Matter and stuff, and there's more visibility of Black women, Black queer folks and stuff like that. There's so much potential in it. And then I said, well, man, it seems like the system will also latch on to that too, at a time where like maybe they're becoming the vanguard and us men is going to have to step back in supporting roles, but they've been driven into the political voting system. It's now, it's like they're running for office, you know, all this other stuff and the visibility is being used to blunt that revolutionary potential. And I'm like, oh my God, man, why now is everybody back into like voting? This is some crazy stuff. When has voting ever worked for us? And then with the most crazy guy in office, you still want to save this system. And you don't see how it's like an evil for me. Like everything is now got to be whatever we did. We like acting like we're going to force them to recognize our jazz as American music.
Classical music.
You know, I'm like, why?
Right.
Our writers as, you know, American icons. And like, why, man?
Yeah.
Because it keeps us locked in. Just keeps us locked in. I think that's one reason why there's a certain part of me would always be nationalist, because no, America is the reason why we're in this situation. The United States, the North, South, whatever, we're here. So why do we want to join? And even with, you know, church and stuff like that, whether it's my church or others, there's no more critique of folks who join police force, join the military, all this other stuff. In fact, you know, once they go in, they get a little celebration. Once they come home, if they come home, there's another celebration, and they're proud that they was in the Marines and they proud that they was in the Navy. Right. But I'm like, well, but your good book says that, you know, the Roman Empire, it's all right to join them now. It's all right to participate in their all their criminal systems. How is, I want to be able to challenge for me. So I feel like at least I can challenge that on that basis, because I'm a part of that book too, my church. You know, I know the language, you know, and I'm like, it don't seem right to me that we can participate in this system like we do. You know, it don't seem right. What do you think about that? You know, the book says da 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 da, and I ain't nowhere near one that can say, you know, whatever book it is, verse this, that, line 16 to 20. But I know enough to say it's in that book that we should be fighting this system, that we should not be embracing this Roman Empire, you know, and it's the craziest thing. So I look for are there other churches? Like I like that brother from Chicago, Otis Moss III. Are you familiar with him? He took over, what's his name's church, who Obama threw under the bus, as they say.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Wright. So Otis Moss III took it over. And so I go on YouTube, and any one of his sermons I click onto, I'm like, wow, he's laying this stuff down, man. He's being critical, you know. And so I know that there's others like him, and there's other ministers who I like Googled or found on YouTube who are really coming with some messages. Some can get really theological. Others keep it at a level that folks can understand. But
there's a church right on Brown's campus that I went to the first time I went to church last weekend in like I don't know how long, but and he out of nowhere started talking about capitalism. I was like, wait a minute, how do we and he was talking about going into like the little place. I was like, is he reading psychoanalysis? He was like going into like the little place in the back of your mind to talk to God. And he was like, and he was really about like not revealing that to people. Like, you don't have to reveal what you're talking to God about, you know, like that's between